Hi, I'm Anna Targett, a London Blue Badge tourist guide, and I occasionally take guided tours of Cannizzaro Park, which is normally a haven of peace and tranquility, but today it's going to be very busy because today we have a festival of art in the park. Cannizzaro Park gets its name from Cannizzaro House, which we can see just behind us. And this was originally called Warren House. It only got its name in the early 1800s because a duke came to live here, the Duke of Cannizzaro. He was a dashing ambassador from Sicily, and he was looking for a wealthy wife, which he managed to succeed in finding. The two were married and they took residence here at Cannizzaro Park. And since that time, it has had the name Cannizzaro House. Art in the park has quite a history. In fact, the first person to be a great art collector lived in this house. His name was Lyde Brown. 250 years ago, he amassed a wonderful collection of sculpture and art, and he wanted to make some money. So he decided to sell it to Catherine the Great, which he did so successfully. Part of his collection is now, in fact, in the British Museum. In more recent times, art in the park has been taken up, and there have been several festivals, particularly in the 1980s with the participation of Wimbledon School of Art, and also in 2000s we had several exhibitions of sculpture, particularly Zimbabwean sculpture actually. So we have had art from all around the world here at Cannizzaro. Our work of art which greets you as you enter Cannizzaro Park is actually by one of the professors of Wimbledon School of Art. His name is Richard Rome, and this is our Millennium Fountain. Is it a Grecian urn? Or maybe you might even fondly call it the teapot. Let's go off into the park and let's see a little bit more. When Cannizzaro Park was acquired by Wimbledon Council after the Second World War, an evaluation was done of the trees and shrubs and plants here. The curator from Kew came over and he looked at the park, and he said that there were several species that were very important, rather exotic species, and that actually grew better here at Cannizzaro than they even did at Kew. Now, we have several trees here which are actually on the tree register of the British Isles, and some of them are 100, 200 years old. This one behind us is much younger. In fact, it only dates back to 1990, and when it was planted, it was only 1 metre high. It's now over 23 metres high, and that puts it among the tallest trees in London. So the Cannizzaro estate was originally over 300 acres. Nowadays, Cannizzaro Park is only about 35 acres, but there is one area where it was extended, and in the early 1900s, this area that we are in now was bought by the residents at the time. And if you look at this wall here, you can see that this is a stretch of wall which is actually connected to the wall behind, and this was the garden of a big house just behind, Keir House. And this is where the Aguilar family lived. They were a Catholic family, and in the 1830s, finally they were able to worship easily. And so they had their own private chaplain in this tiny little cottage here, and so they converted it into a chapel. So that's the reason why this rather atmospheric, beautiful little house in Cannizzaro Park is known as the priest's house. Welcome to the kitchen garden, surrounded on all sides by walls. This is where, in the past, the food would have been grown for the family who lived on this estate. Later, part of it has been converted into the Italian garden, laid out in beautiful Italian style. And then, more recently, part of the garden, the potting studios or the potting sheds have now been converted into artist studios. So this is really where the focus of art in the park is taking place. But in the past, We had all sorts of events here. We have had grand productions of Shakespeare. We've had production of Mamma Mia here. We've had very, very famous people performing here, such as Amy Winehouse, for example, and comedy with Joe Brand, Paul Merton. So all sorts of events in this particular area. So here we are at Cannizzaro House, now the Hotel du Vin, which opened in 1987 as London's first country house hotel. And now you can be entertained here. But in the past, the type of people that were entertained here were nobility, famous writers, famous actors, and even kings and queens. In fact, King George III came here to inspect the troops on Wimbledon Common, and he came afterwards to Cannizzaro House for a very, very nice breakfast. But here we have had garden parties where Oscar Wilde was entertained, for example. We have had prime ministers who have been entertained in the house. So really the history of Cannizzaro Park does involve some really quite notable people.
My name's Katie Preston. I'm one of the co-organisers of Art in the Park, which is an arts festival happening today in Cannizzaro Park in Wimbledon. I'm standing in the Herb Garden today, which is a beautiful part of Cannizzaro. We've got events happening all over the park. We've got an art fair, a sculptor trail, activities, classes, a whole range of things happening. We're a team of artists who came together in January and February during lockdown, and we've come together, generated lots of exciting ideas, made connections with lots of local artists, and they've all come together outside in Cannizzaro to join in a community day full of creativity and exciting activity. One of the other things we've got, which is very exciting, we've got a community sculpture by a sculptor who works in the park called Norris. So he's actually doing a live sculpture, which once finished will stay on display in the park. And people, all the community can join in and contribute to the sculpture, which is very exciting. One of the components of getting this project together was having sponsorship, and we were really lucky to be put in touch with Viking, who have become our headline sponsor, and they have sponsored the sculpture, which is wonderful.
Hello there, my name's Tim Norris. I'm an artist based in the UK. I make sculpture, land art, mostly from natural materials. Well, I've always loved to paint and to draw, and I love furniture making, and sculpture seemed like the perfect marriage of my ideas when I was a late teenager. So I then studied fine art sculpture in Canterbury. Each project is very interesting in its own right and so different than each other. One of my favourite ones, amongst my favourite ones, are the ones in other countries, particularly USA. I've done a wonderful project at a place called iPark in the USA in Connecticut, artists enclave where they invite artists to come and work from all over the world, and I was one of 10 artists, and we all worked together for a 3-week period to produce a piece of work at the end. I find most of my inspiration from, on the whole, looking at nature. There's an extraordinary vast array of inspiration to be found there. So I guess that's probably the starting point for a lot of my projects. Well, I love to work with materials that are from the location where the artwork is going to be sited. It's very important that there's a connection between the materials I use and the location where the artwork is going to be placed. Recycled materials is often an opportune find in a place and can take a project in an entirely new direction that I hadn't anticipated before I got there. I often work with a team of skilled craftspeople, furniture makers and sculptors to help me build the work. Interestingly though, since the pandemic I've been working entirely alone, and that's brought other interesting aspects to it, but mostly, yeah, I have a wide variety of people who help me, from skilled and non-skilled people, to help build the projects, like this one here, in fact, which is going to be a community-based sculpture. When I was originally approached by the Friends of Cannizzaro Park to design a sculpture for the park, it was integral that many people could be involved with it, and could we get children and adults both to participate in its creation. And that's very much part of what I do. And so I've actually designed the piece in a number of separate pieces so we can have lots of hands working at the same time during this event, which will eventually be located in the park itself. The design is very much inspired by this park itself, given that Cannizzaro is an unusual park for London. It's got such a broad range of exotic species. I've been had a studio in this park for the last 15 years, and so I've been lucky enough to walk around here regularly as both a therapeutic break during my other projects, but also just to give me inspiration. So I've actually collected a huge range of seed pods and buds from different species around the park, and I've been using those as my source of inspiration and to the actual form itself. So you can see here I've begun the weaving process here. So initially I've welded a steel frame to build the form of the work, and this can be then used to weave the various natural materials into. So this is part of the sphere that will sit in the centre, and this kind of represents the nucleus of the seed. The energy giving component is going to be right in the middle, and we're able to witness the very centre of the seed in activity. That's the sort of concept. So it's kind of based partly on real referential observation of nature and partly from my imagination of the processes that take place within the growth of a seed. But so this here is a natural product. This is willow that has been cut and then re-soaked for the last 7 days, which makes it extremely pliable. And you can see that it is a very pliable. There's not many species that are quite so readily pliable like this, but it can be used to so the participants will be able to come along and help me weave the structure. It's a little bit akin to a basket really, and something like that. And this will get stronger and stronger over the coming days as I get more and more material onto the structure. Once the different components, I think in total there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 components to build the sculpture up, and the sphere itself will be, this is one half of the sphere, there's another half which will go on the back here. That will actually end up going, you can see that one going here. This slots in temporarily here. And in the end, this hooded area will be woven with a buff willow. We've got hazel to go on the outside, a more of a rugged look. And then we'll get this, hopefully this spherical area here. And in the very centre will be the nucleus, which will be a carved oak ball, which is from Cannizzaro itself. So that's the sort of concept. But I'm sure, as all these projects, it will develop throughout the community engagement, and hopefully we'll get better and better. So here we've got here, this is a roughed out block of a fallen oak tree in Cannizzaro. So I was able to rough this out to approximately half a sphere. So this is half a sphere and there's the other half. But we've got quite a bit of work to kind of shape this up to produce a nice finish. So here's the template. We can see this is approximately the size we want. And so I've got to try and get that rough old shape to fit something like that. So using a wood carving chisel, actually green oak carves very beautifully. It's still got the natural sap in the materials, so it tends to carve very nicely. And over the years, English oak becomes exceptionally hard, but at this stage, it's a really pleasurable carving material. One of the nicest, actually. So when these spheres are finished, they'll be hopefully pretty much a 400mm sphere, and they will sit in the very centre of the sculpture. And they'll probably have some kind of possibly a burnt design on them to indicate some of their energetic quality. I want these to be almost the nucleus of the sculpture itself, and they are very much a key part of Cannizzaro. Cannizzaro has an incredible collection of trees, but its veteran oak trees are some of its finest.
Here we are outside the sunken garden beautifully colourful, as you can see. Maybe you'd like to come and enjoy Cannizzaro Park yourselves. Take a walk through the various different areas. There's lots more to see, with beautiful rhododendrons in spring, azaleas. It really is a wonderful place to experience nature and get a little bit away from the hustle and bustle of daily life.